As a virtual assistant supporting therapists in private practice, your onboarding procedure is one of the most important foundations of building a successful working relationship. This stage is not just about you getting information and setting up systems. It is about creating clarity, communication, and trust from the very beginning. A well-structured onboarding procedure should significantly improve the following areas: therapist satisfaction and retention, workflow efficiency, communication clarity, professional boundaries, and long-term working success. As a virtual assistant, you are not just completing tasks. You are building systems that allow the therapist to focus on what they enjoy doing, which is usually therapy, while feeling confident that everything on their back end is being handled by you. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Kim, and I help virtual assistants go from being a support act to a specialist partner working with their clients. So let's talk about the onboarding procedure. So basically what an onboarding procedure is when you first start working with a client. So for us, this is therapists in private practice. So when you first start working with a therapist, you have a very structured system of how you start working with that therapist. And you want to establish this up front and implement it for each client that you work with. It's so important that you take the lead on this rather than them taking the lead, because they are going to feel so much more comfortable and supported and feel the trust with you so much more quickly if you take control of the situation. If they know that you've got this handled, they are going to know that you can handle the running of their private practice. So there are definitely some things that you need to think about in advance so that you can communicate that with your therapist. And usually this is going to be done via a contract, which you are going to send the client, because they are your client and you need to send out a contract for your working relationship. So some things that you want to think about are communication expectations. How and when should your client communicate with you, and how will you communicate with them? You also want to confirm response times and platforms that you will use. So maybe this will be email and WhatsApp, or email and a project management system like Asana. Whatever it is, there's no right or wrong answer. It's really specific to you and how you want to work, but you want to have this clear upfront so that everybody knows what's going on. The second thing you want to decide are your working hours, because really it's up to you. It's your business. So if you only want to work Monday to Wednesday, Monday to Thursday, whether you work weekends only, whatever it is, obviously this needs to fit with what the client wants to, but you would have discussed this in the discovery call. But you really want to make it clear what your availability is, what your working hours are, and when you will be checking in with their practice, because this is not going to be your only client. You will be working with other clients, so you might want to say, I will check in with your account twice a day. I'll check in the morning and I'll check in the afternoon, something like that, and I'll do that Monday to Thursday. You want to be really clear about what your working hours are, what your availability is, and how quickly you will respond to things. You want to be really clear on what each of your roles and responsibilities are. So what is it that the therapist is responsible for? What is it that you're responsible for? And how are decisions made? It's going to be really great for your working relationship if this is sorted out up front. Who responds to emails? Who's looking after this inbox? Who is in charge of rescheduling appointments? Who's in charge of rescheduling appointments if they're done short notice? Things like that. So you want to make sure that all of the roles and responsibilities are very clearly defined. Now, this might need to be done with each individual therapist, each individual client. You might not be able to decide all of this up front, because a therapist might only want you to take over certain roles, whereas with another therapist client, you run the whole practice. So you can have like an outline of this in your contract, but you might need to be more specific with each client. So the next thing is systems and processes. So what systems does the therapist use? What systems are you going to set up for them? And what are the processes around this? Again, you do want to define some of this in advance, but you may be working with the therapist on improving their systems and processes. So it will be, okay, I'm going to write standard operating procedures for all of the tasks that we do as I do them, as I take them over, things like that. So again, it's good to know upfront what systems and processes there are, but you may have been hired to improve this area of their business. So again, this can be different for each individual client. Data protection and confidentiality. So you want to make sure you have in your contract all information about anyone you work with, whether that's HIPAA, whether that's GDPR, whether you're a member of the ICO, these are things if you're in the UK, or any other like department that you need to kind of be aware of, whatever country you are in. So you want to make sure that they know which rules and regulations you are sticking to based on where you live, and if they live somewhere different, confirming that you will also stick to the rules and regulations of their country, state, whatever as well. You want to really document how you're going to handle data securely and confirm that they are the data controller and that you are the data handler, or whatever the words are. I'll put it on screen what it actually is. But basically that the data is owned by them and you only process it. You only deal with the data, but it's not your data. So they are in charge of the data that they hold on their clients. You also want to outline your boundaries and professional standards. So you want to make sure that you tell them how you're going to work ethically, confidentiality, and within best practice at all times. So you just want to make this abundantly clear within your contract, basically how it is that you are going to work and how you are going to make sure that their data, their clients' data is handled in a professional way. So it's really important that you set clear boundaries for yourself as a business owner, and then you communicate them with your client upfront in advance of your working relationship to make sure that you are aligned on this, especially with things around your working hours, availability and communication. So some other things that you will want to think about is your own invoicing process. So how are you invoicing your clients? When will they receive that invoice, and how quickly do they need to pay? This information needs to be given to your client in advance, upfront in your contract. Your working hours, as I have said, and then also if you subcontract. So if you work with associate VAs, you need to make this very clear to the clients, especially therapists in private practice. They need to know if they're going to be working with you or they're going to be working with someone else. And they also 100% want to know who has access to their client's data, who has access to their inboxes, who has access to their passwords and all that kind of stuff. So you really need to make that clear if it's going to be you working with the client one-to-one or it's going to be someone else. Just know I run a virtual assistant agency, and I've just started a licensing program where I train virtual assistants on how to work with therapists in private practice in their own business. So not with me as an associate, but as themselves. And all of that works. So don't be afraid of growing your virtual assistant business and thinking, oh God, if I grow this business, people aren't going to want to work with someone they don't know. They will. If you build a good enough reputation on your own, they will trust you if you say you're going to be working with this person. You just need to handle it a little bit differently from other businesses, is what I found. They need to know exactly who they're working with at all times. They don't want to know that Jane's coming in and then Kim's coming in and then Lucy's coming in and all these different people. They need to know exactly who they're working with and build a rapport with that person. So that's the other piece of information I'd give you. That's just really a side note, is that don't tell them they're working with you and then outsource work to somebody else who they don't build that trust and rapport with. If you are building an agency, build an agency and say, I'm the head of this. I will oversee everything that's being done, but your virtual assistant is going to be Kim. You know, Kim is going to be working with you. You will get to meet Kim. Don't hide Kim from the therapist. Don't worry that Kim is going to steal your client. That's not how it works in my world. I have never worked with associates that have stolen clients from me. And realistically, if you do, you don't want to work with that associate and you don't want to work with that client either. So, you know, just as a bit of a side note, back to the onboarding process. So let's talk about the steps of an onboarding process. And I just want to say, I do have a free resource that guides you through this, and it's got email templates and additional resources in it as well. So I'm going to link that here and I'll talk about it again at the end of the video, but it's completely free. You can download it. It really is specific about onboarding therapist clients because I do think they are different to a lot of other clients you may work with. So this isn't something you can probably just create on ChatGPT. I've done all the work for you. Download it. It's going to take you a couple of seconds for it to come into your inbox rather than you putting in all the right prompts to ChatGPT, because trust me, it's not going to be as good. So number one, you want to send them a welcome email with your contract. So I give you a welcome email template in the resource, and you don't get a contract or anything. You have to create that yourself or buy one. I actually have one on my website if you want to buy it. You will need to send them a welcome email and a contract. You want to get that sent and signed upfront before you start doing any work. The second step is to complete an onboarding call. So you want to have a call with the therapist once they've signed the contract where you take them through what is going to happen next. And again, in the resource, I go through what you should say on that call and all the things that you should do, but that's the second step. My recommendation for this call not only is to talk them through what's going to happen next, it's to really get an in-depth look of how they run their private practice. Now, I do something called a private practice workflow, which basically talks through the client journey all the way from inquiry, so when the client first reaches out to a therapist, until they finish with them. You want to understand all of the procedures, everything that happens with that client from start to finish, and then you can get a clear understanding of how the therapist runs everything. And here is where you may say, okay, this doesn't work, we can implement this, we should put this template in place, we should have email templates for these reminders, all the things you might want to change for the betterment of the running of their private practice. So that would be my suggestion. I do actually have a free course which is called the Private Practice Workflow. It is specifically for therapists. However, as a virtual assistant working with therapists, I do think this is going to be really helpful for you to understand how a private practice is run from start to finish and the different ways you can improve things. So if you want access to that course, you can of course download it as well. I'll leave that links everywhere. The next step is to schedule a training call. So here is where you are going to want the therapist to train you on how they currently do things. This can also be a chance for you to set up things that you need access to. So maybe they have a Google Workspace account and they need to add you as a user. So you might need to talk them through how to do that. You can help them with that. You can make sure it's all working and everything's synced up. Again, they may need to share things with you from their drive, and again, they might not know how to do that. So it's great to do it on a call, on a Zoom call, where you can share screen and talk them through it. Again, this just builds trust and like competency in them, understanding that you know what you're talking about and they feel safe with you. That's like the main thing. They want to feel safe knowing that you know what you're doing. And in that call as well, you might want to help them set up password sharing. So you might want to set up LastPass or OnePass or some kind of way that they can share passwords with you so that you can access things like any EHR or systems that they have. I would suggest you have your own login for an email address. So you don't really want to be using the therapist email address. You want to have your own inbox. Just keeps email separate of like, this is what I need to deal with, so that the clients of the therapist know, okay, if I'm rescheduling an appointment, if I'm dealing with invoicing, I can contact the PA. And if I want to talk to my therapist about something really personal that's going on, I know that the PA is not going to see that information. I can just email the therapist. So I would definitely suggest to the therapist to separate the accounts. Just makes it easier. And then you can just share folders and calendars and all that kind of stuff. But do that on a call with them, just so they understand exactly what you have access to and that you can help them with that process. So what you want is a seamless integration into their practice. You need to understand all of their processes, procedures, and things like that. Now, I would bet my house on the fact that most therapists will not have SOPs. They won't have written or video guides of how they do their work. So you may need to write these, but you do need to understand the process so they can tell you this is what I do. So you might need to set up training days of them showing you how certain things work. If they use systems that you're not used to, they will need to train you on those as well. So you'll need to schedule in that kind of stuff. That is not how I work as a virtual assistant for therapists in private practice. I make them move on to the systems that I recommend and know and love. But that's like another video for another time. If you are taking on clients that use systems that you're not familiar with, you will need to be shown how to use this, you will need access to them, and you will need some training on that. So what I would suggest is you make sure that you are writing standard operating procedures for the therapist. So you want to do that. And if this doesn't work out between you and them, for whatever reason, at least they'll have that for the next VA. I just think that's really helpful for them and for you, you know, going forward. If possible, get them to screen record, or you can record the Zoom session of them training you on how to do things so that you can write these things later. Just make sure you delete all of that information, or, you know, upload it to their drive, delete it off any of your local desktop and things like that, because it probably will contain client information. So you just want to make sure that you're handling that really sensitively, but it can be really useful for you, you know, when they've shown you once, you don't want to keep going back to them, asking them questions. You know, if you can just refer back to a video. And especially with AI now, it's really easy to get transcripts from that. You can get that directly from Zoom, and you can even get them to write procedures from what they said. So this doesn't all need to be done manually. You can do it with AI. So the final part of the onboarding procedure really is creating this long-term client satisfaction. That is what we want, right? We want long-term clients. We don't want to work with clients for a month and then they ghost us or things don't work out. You know, you don't want to have to keep getting new clients all the time. One of the things that I found with therapists in private practice is that they're super loyal once you do a good job for them. I have never had a client leave me or my team or anything like that because of an issue with the working relationship. I've had to let go of clients for certain reasons, and the working relationship has come to an end because they've stopped working and things like that, but never has somebody left me because of the work. So if you do a good job, if you stick to what it is you say you're going to do, if you communicate well, which is like the number one thing, communicate well, please, you will not lose that client. Ways that you can communicate well and create long-term client satisfaction is by setting up project management. So rather than just using something like WhatsApp and email, you can set up Asana or Notion or something where projects and work can be communicated and backed up, so that you always know that if a client says, I asked you to do that, you can say, oh yes you did, or no you actually didn't, and just have that really clear boundaries and communication. Another thing I would suggest is having a monthly meeting. When you work with a therapist client, once you've done kind of the training and got everything working, there's not really much reason to talk to that person unless they're working on ongoing projects that change a lot. So I do suggest having, even if it's just a quick 20-minute meeting once a month, just to see what they've got going on, see if they've got any problems. Sometimes they don't raise a problem on email. Maybe you've made a mistake and they haven't really mentioned it, but just on a phone call they might say, by the way, I've noticed that this XYZ is an issue, and it can come across just so much more casual in a meeting like this. Make sure you take minutes, make sure you note down all of these meetings, what was said and all that kind of stuff. It's really important for transparency, and just if they ever, there are always going to be clients that are just not nice people, just like there are not nice VAs, and so just having that backup is going to just be really helpful for you and for them. And I would also do a weekly report. So this report will just tell them how many hours you've worked, what you have done. So obviously you don't need to be like contacted John about his appointment and then he replied to me and then I replied to him and we couldn't find a date and then we eventually found a date. You don't need to go super in depth, but you might just want to say, 3 clients haven't paid for last week's sessions, I have chased them, and then just note down who they are. You might want to say, this person hasn't paid for the last 2 sessions, you might want to speak to them about it, I have chased them twice. Just that kind of information that's really important for a therapist to know. You might want to say just basically anything that you've done that's anything that you're working on, like any projects that you're working on, just give them an update. Even though you might do that in Asana or Notion, just give them a weekly report. I think it just goes a long way to them knowing that you're there, you're doing stuff, because again, you might not communicate with this therapist on a day-to-day or even a week-to-week basis sometimes. So just giving them an end-of-week report can be really helpful. Okay, so that was a very in-depth video of how to onboard therapist clients. But I have so much more information to give you in that free download that I talked about, which I'm going to link here. I would really recommend you downloading it. It's got resources, it's got email templates, it's got loads of stuff. It's step-by-step how you can onboard therapist clients and how you can work with them to create that long-term, great working relationship. So if you are interested in that, go ahead and download it. And until next time, thanks so much for watching.